Ladies and gentlemen, hit subscribe to this channel right now. To my super chat, thank you. If you want to talk about anything pertaining to this live stream via super chat, your super chat's greatly appreciated. It is not for the Guardian or the Washington Post or the New York Times to declare whether or not the Supreme Court is legitimate. The Supreme Court is always legitimate. The legitimacy of the Supreme Court is not dependent upon whether it sides with Trump or Democrats. The legitimacy or the constitutionality of what Democrats and others have done the past couple of years should be in question, not the legitimacy of the Supreme Court. If Democrats continue to lose to Trump, and hit subscribe to this channel right now, you will hear a Supreme Court decision upcoming that's going to benefit President Trump Republicans in the 2026 midterms. They're on their way to winning if they could take advantage of the Supreme Court decision on the Voting Rights Act. You will hear all about that in a second. But Democrats continue to lose in the Supreme Court. Why? Because they continue to be on the wrong side of history. Because what they're engaged in oftentimes is unconstitutional. That's why the Supreme Court overturned the Colorado State Supreme Court when they tried to remove Trump and kick him off the ballot in 2024. We can go through a whole list. President Trump wins about 94% of the time in the Supreme Court. And now you have the legitimacy of the Supreme Court questioned by the same people who want to protect democracy. But the absurdity of that is lost upon the morally superior. Heading into midterms, Republicans hold edge with older voters. This is while the economy is still not booming, not what it can be, not what it will be in 26. Trump Republicans are in a good spot, despite the endless apoplectic media coverage siding with Democrats. Again, President Trump continues to win in the Supreme Court 94% of the time. When he gets the voting rights decision, that could be 19 more House seats. This is huge. And the reason, again, the Supreme Court continually sides with Trump is that he's on the side of the Constitution. What he does, oftentimes, almost always, is constitutional. What Democrats do, according to the Supreme Court, what they try to do to prevent Trump is unconstitutional. The Democratic Party, media, and others are routinely doing things that are ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, tasked with judicial review of the U.S. Constitution, the highest law in the land. So the same Democrats who keeps talking about the republic and our republic, our democracy, our fabric of life, they lost every battleground state. They lost the popular vote. They're losing the Supreme Court time and again. And they have the audacity to question, Democrats, the legitimacy of the Supreme Court when they lost in a modern-day landslide the last election. Hit subscribe to this channel. President Trump and Republicans are in a good position. Now we just have to wait for the Supreme Court decision, which is almost certainly going to be for Trump, as always. And that could mean a lot more districts, Republican districts. Hit subscribe to my super chat. Your super chat support is so greatly appreciated. If you enjoy these live streams, and we're going to try to do 2 to 3 a day, your super chat helps greatly.
Policy strategist May Mailman. May, it's great to see you here today. It looked like in oral arguments the Supreme Court may be ready to put an end to Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, meaning no longer can you use race to gerrymander these minority districts. You can't ensure, for example, a black district in Georgia.
Yeah, it's 2025, and it is time to stop drawing lines on the basis of race. We've had a black president. We've had a black and Asian vice president. As we see the race right now in Virginia, Republicans are going to vote for the black candidate, and Democrats are going to vote against. We are in 2025. It's time to move on. But unfortunately, you see justices like Ketanji Brown Jackson who do not agree that we should move to a race-free society, and instead want to portray race as disability. They want to see this as a disability, something that should be treated, something that should be focused on. And that takes us well before the Civil Rights Act. And so that type of thinking, race as a disability, is exactly the type of thinking that we're trying to get away from, but that you see Democrats, or that you see Ketanji Brown Jackson trying to elevate more and more.
Yeah, I think for anybody watching, they're probably sitting at home wondering, well, if you drew primarily and intentionally white districts, that would be not just racist, but it would be unconstitutional. And here we sit today, as you point out, in 2025, asking, why then can you do it in reverse? Why can you intentionally draw black or brown districts in America? The answer, by the way, the Supreme Court is debating is whether or not they are allowed to or compelled to by the Voting Rights Act. But as you point out, it's no longer 1965.
Yeah, in order to get these districts that have a black majority, states like Louisiana have to take pieces of New Orleans, pieces of Baton Rouge, snake around here, make a circle here, and it doesn't make any sense. If they were going to use neutral principles about keeping districts together, about incumbent protection, yes, sometimes about partisan advantage, but the things that people always use in redistricting, then it would look a lot different than this. And so what the Trump administration said is this is as if LSU had a policy where if a black student and a white student were totally equal, and the government is saying, but you have to pick the black student. That's what's going on here. It would never be allowed at LSU, but somehow it's being required under the Voting Rights Act.
In Congress, not allowed at LSU, but required for Congress in Washington, D.C. After the Civil War, the Civil Rights Act, Jim Crow, and another half a century, it might be time for America to actually consider not enshrining race-based policies, but in fact being exactly, as you said, May, race neutral. Great to see you. Thank you.
Hey, so you have an upcoming victory where Republicans can take advantage big time. Hit subscribe if you're new.
Oh, good. Took John Hughes' time. Here he is. How do you feel about that, John? Former Deputy Assistant AG.
Terrible.
Law professor at Berkeley. We'll cheer you up here. So simply put, Louisiana took two cracks at this. One favored African Americans, one favored whites, and the Supreme Court's going to decide this. Here is Brett Kavanaugh talking about how you remedy this. Go ahead and listen here.
This court's cases in a variety of contexts have said that race-based remedies are permissible for a period of time, sometimes for a long period of time, decades in some cases, but that they should not be indefinite and should have an endpoint.
When he's making there, and you heard David Spun say 60 years, 1965. So he's arguing that there was a sunset period possibly that was built into this law. How do you read that? Do you think he's right?
I think he is right. I think you can see that this view is motivating the 6 conservative justices on the court. Here's the basic issue. The Constitution bans the government from ever using race. It wants all of us to treat each other the same, regardless of our skin color, race, national origin, religion, and so on. We allow deviations from that core principle to just make up for past sins, for the government's use of race and segregation in the South for so many years, or for slavery before that. And what Justice Kavanaugh is asking is, when does that end? It's 60 years later now since the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It's been 60 years since the government has forced states to try to use race to create these what are called majority-minority districts, to increase the number of minorities who actually get elected to Congress. But that's got to come to an end. It's not going to be, and it shouldn't be under the Constitution, ever permanent. And the court's been making that clear in other areas, like the Harvard case, where it said no more use of race in college admissions. I think that campaign for a colorblind constitution will continue here, and the court will say no more use of race when states draw congressional districts either.
Okay, let me come back to that. A New York Times, a Supreme Court case that could hand the House to Republicans. There are some who believe if the court rules as you're describing there, John.
And by the way, the best thing that could happen to President Trump and Republicans in 2026 is for Democrats and media to continually say the Supreme Court is illegitimate. Most Americans don't buy that absurd logic. Most Americans are either offended or find that completely absurd, that notion, that belief that a court is illegitimate. Nobody says that the court is illegitimate because one court sided with Comey and Letitia James. I'm not saying that that court was illegitimate. And you had federal judges. They're not illegitimate. They're just liberal. And they get overturned by the Supreme Court all the time. But they're not illegitimate. And these are the same people who clutch their pearls at Trump stating that Biden's presidency was not legitimate. So if it works for them, the legitimacy is pristine. If it doesn't work for them, oh my God, it's the end of the world. And, we don't think it's legitimate. But most people don't buy that. You lost the fight for the Supreme Court in 2016. Democrats cheated Bernie Sanders in a fake and phony primary that they still utilized in 2024 when they cheated Biden after like 13, 14 million people voted for Biden in the primary. Okay, they kicked him to the curb politically, and then they shouldn't have done that. That's the typical Democratic Party, modern day Democratic Party. They don't even have functioning primaries, and they're calling the Supreme Court illegitimate. I mean, and then they're talking about defending democracy. Then they're talking about, oh, Trump is a dictator. It's like they're the ones who act in that despotic manner. But anyway, let's continue.
That the GOP could gain 19 more House seats. Do you see that as reasonable?
It's possible. I am sure the justices, when they decide this case, don't care and won't look at what the effects on the midterm maps may be. Now, what's been going on, note, is that these states, in order to create these majority-minority districts, have done what's called crack and pack. They've packed minority voters into tight districts on the assumption they'll vote for a black or Hispanic or even Asian candidate, which I think, by the way, is offensive because it assumes that people of one race will vote for people of the same race when they vote for office. What will happen, I think, if this practice ends, is that there will be more minorities spread out into more districts. That might make more districts competitive in the long run between Republicans and Democrats, even though in the short run, it might lead to less Democrats in the House in the next election.
What if I argued the other side and said, if I'm a minority, how do I find representation under that interpretation of the law then?
Well, this, I think, is the pernicious view of the Voting Rights Act and the 15th Amendment that this cause has adopted, is the idea that because I have a skin color or you have a skin color, Bill, you think you're only represented by people who look like you. What if you want to be represented by people who share your interests?
So President Trump almost won the Latino vote in 2024. If you look at the numbers, he was like 3 or 4 points away, maybe about 5 points away or so. But that he was 20 plus points away in 2016. And he almost won in 2024. So it only takes 10 years for a complete paradigm shift.
Instead, suppose I want to vote for someone who has my view on tax policy or foreign affairs or Israel. Why does race and skin color have anything to do with your view or my view on policy issues? And I think that's what the court wants to end. The court wants to end the practice of the government assuming that you and I have certain views and think a certain way just because of our skin color.
Quickly, John, would they give a sooner? You heard the question that Dana gave to David Spunt. Is this like, do you have to wait until June? Is that too late? What's your view quickly on that?
Quickly, I'm not yielding any of my time to Spunt, but what these state legislatures could do is just pass a new map and say the new map comes into effect if the Supreme Court strikes down the Louisiana voting map and otherwise leave the districts as they are.
Okay, in that case, they'd have to get ahead of it. We'll see how that goes. John, thank you, sir, very much.
So, again, this Supreme Court is about to rule for Trump, but this is really interesting. Even if they get the House, they can get the House. They don't have the DOJ, they don't have the FBI, CIA, all the tools that they used, all the departments or the agencies that they used to go up and frame and set up Trump and try to harm him politically. They don't have any of those things anymore. They'll get the House, and they'll likely not want to talk about the EP files ever again because it points directly to them, which is why you have Democrats resigning and you have Democrats texting Jeffrey Epps. I mean, it's unbelievable. And they still, it is still being spun as a Trump issue when he wasn't. Jeffrey Epps despised Trump. And somehow they turned that into a bad thing. Yeah, you want to be despised by somebody who's a monster. Who was a Democratic donor. But anyway, if they're running AOC in 28, that should tell you about what they're thinking of doing in 26. If they get the House, it's probably the worst thing for them. They might be forced to run AOC, and you'll see a modern-day landslide far beyond what took place with Harris. Check this out.
Socialist Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is feeling loud and proud after a new and very early poll has her slightly ahead of J.D. Vance in a hypothetical 2028 presidential race. Here's what she had to say when asked about it.
Reaction to, or do you think that you could beat J.D. Vance in a head-to-head race for president, as polling suggests, in 2028?
Listen, these polls, like 3 years out, are, they are what they are. But let the record show, I would stomp him.
Jackie, you manifested this, so this is your fault.
I did, you did, because hypothetically you keep talking about hypothetical President
true.
AOC.
It is true.
When you want to talk about how the tables get
There it
turned.
is. Am I wrong?
You're not
I'm
wrong.
not wrong.
But what do I think about that?
Yep.
I think that she was actually being kind of funny. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. I don't think she's taking it seriously. And I don't think anybody else is either. I also still think the Democrats are stuck in this problematic cycle of continuing to run the same failed candidates over and over again. She does not have national mass appeal. She would appeal in New York City, for example, but that's about it. And so I really think that they're thinking they want to run Kamala again, which is why she's been out there the way that she has been out there. And I really think that Kamala thinks that she has a chance. So,
Larry, the worry is the charisma, the socialism is sexy, that appeals very much to a younger generation.
I agree, by the way. I agree. I think there will be a battle in the Democratic Party between the left and the far left, right? I mean, Kamala Harris may run, and she might represent the left, and AOC might run, and she might represent the socialist far left, okay? I think AOC is a really good politician. I think she's a great communicator, and I would be wary of her. But the other side of me says, well, hang on a second, because Trump's policies, which are based on free market capitalism, is the best path to prosperity. Yeah, it's going to work so well that the socialists in the Democratic Party, in fact, the whole Democratic Party, is going to get blown up and wiped out. That's what I think. They don't have any diversity. They need a John F. Kennedy tax cutter. They need a...
The Democrats don't stand for anything nowadays. They don't want Medicare for all, single payer. They used to 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. Nobody's talking. Even AOC hasn't talked about single payer, and I don't even know how long. There's no legislation they're pushing for single payer health care, but they're going to complain about subsidies, which are needed because the ACA has made things too expensive. And so all the problems we face should have been addressed now by the Affordable Care Act, but they're not. So it's unbelievable. They championed the alleged assassin of a healthcare CEO. That's the only thing they've done in the past year pertaining to healthcare. They have a zero plan, zero. Their whole thing was Medicare for all and single payer. That was how progressives gained votes for the past 10 years. They're not touching that. They lied to their constituents, as always. They don't even have functioning primaries. So they cheated Bernie Sanders. They cheated Biden. They lie about their policy agenda. What else do they stand for? They wanted to pack the Supreme Court. Then they should run on that. Oh, ICE. Okay. Why don't they defund ICE? They're not going to defund anything. They just want to create enough hysteria. They run on hysteria and hope for policies that they have no intention of implementing. So if it's not hysteria, they distort the record always when it comes to what ICE is doing. They're literally enforcing existing immigration laws. If you don't like the laws, then reform them. Or if you don't like the agency enforcing them, then defund ICE. But they're not talking about any of these things. They were keying Teslas months back. And then celebrating the death of Charlie Kirk. I mean, what do they stand for? What's one piece of legislation they stand for? Or what's one policy agenda? Nobody knows. Trump, we know, wants to enforce immigration. That's why Democrats are hysterical over ICE. Trump wants to implement tariffs to bring back manufacturing. They have no alternative plan pertaining to outsourcing. They just don't like what Trump is doing. Then he wants to stop the flow of illegal narcotics. I agree that I would rather not engage in a regime change or that type of military endeavor, but that's his foreign policy to prevent. I mean, we just saw an atrocity took place in Hollywood pertaining to a, renowned legendary actor. Allegedly, the family member was under the influence. Allegedly. Okay. And so that ties in directly to what Trump is doing, trying to stop illegal narcotics into the country. But you look at what President Trump is doing in terms of foreign policy, in terms of trade, in terms of immigration policy, in terms of the economy overall. And so what's the answer that Democrats have? Oh, the EP files, but it points to them. They have no answer. There's zero. It's probably best for Trump for them to have the House. Let them impeach Trump for the 50th time. And then they'll run AOC. It'll be fantastic.
A Bill Clinton moderate.
Yeah.
They need an Al Gore moderate. They don't have one. All those
Al Gore moderate. I don't know. I was with you until you got to Al Gore.
You had me with Kennedy and Clinton.
Are you kidding? Al Gore. I want to know. Al Gore was, as a young man.
Older Al Gore. Younger
Al Gore voted for the Reagan 28%.
The incredibly lifelike Al Gore, that type of personality, that the centrist Democrat is not popular. The electricity and the energy for the past 10 years within the Democratic Party on a national scale has always been the furthest left. You can win in Virginia or like New Jersey, or these are blue states historically. Well, Trump almost won New Jersey. So, I mean, again, on a national scale, Republicans have a huge advantage, even though all of media is firmly like a public relations monstrosity for Democrats. You're going to win individual contests for Congress or Attorney General or Governor. Democrats will win those in states where there's a strong Democratic Party. But they don't have anything on a national scale. So the political party on a national scale is like non-existent now. They have AOC and they have Harris. They have nobody else. Nobody else. They have Newsom. You could say Newsom. Yeah, you know what? I would love to see Newsom versus Vance. I would love that. Okay. It would be very likely Harris Trump 24. A California Democrat and a New York Democrat nationally is not going to be very popular, okay?
15 and 28% tax cut reform, okay?
Right.
And he was Bill Clinton's running mate when they cut the capital gains tax and balanced the budget. That was Al Gore. Anyway, we could argue. I'm just saying Trump and Trump economics, which is reimagining capitalism here, it will blow them up. We'll blow them up. Let them run. He'll blow them up, and J.D. Vance will probably run on it. He'd be crazy not to run on the success of that thing, and there's no chance.
Dagan, do you share the same optimism?
I think that AOC blows up figuratively because of what this disastrous socialism experiment.
I pray to God AOC runs for president. I pray to God. It would be the best thing that ever happened to the country. If the left of the United States of America is so passionate and so indoctrinated and truly believes that they're not the baddies. Oh, we're the baddies. They're not the baddies. They're the good. They're the just. They're the moral. Then run on it nationally. Then run on socialist policies nationally. Why doesn't AOC run for president and introduce single-payer health care? Run on that. Do it. You have pundits making $100,000 a month on the left that used to push Medicare for all. Well, why don't they want AOC to run? Well, they probably don't even care. They'll vote for Liz Cheney if she's a Democrat. They're like AI robots. But and I don't say that this in terms of in a belligerent manner. If a person is on the left of, far left or progressive, or they truly believe that single payer is moral and just, then I don't know. Wouldn't you think you'd want to run on that nationally? Oh, it's not good politics. Oh, then if nothing on the left is good politics, then what does that say about the political side?
Delivers to the residents here, and she's going to own it, or when it explodes, it's going to cover her in detritus, and she won't be able to wash it off. I'm hoping that she owns that. That's who she is, and you are going to see the rotten fruits of that labor movement.
You're talking about Mandami.
Yes.
Yeah.
But she's in the heart of it. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if the one person I'm watching is Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan. And there was two lines that jumped out of an article about Oracle yesterday about this data center that's in Michigan. That there were some issues about issues about how they're financing this data center build out. And the line said, there is a bipartisan group of lawmakers in the state who are trying to stop data centers from being developed. But Gretchen Whitmer came out in support of that Oracle data center. And I went, good on you.
Yeah, nice.
Because there is a right, left, and center movement to stop artificial intelligence innovation. And what is ultimately, you've referred to it as the next great industrial revolution, and it is, but that is our future in terms of productivity and growth. Larry,
Brian, quick thoughts.
I'm very sorry, Jackie, but I'm going to keep using my AOC hypothetical presidency.
Okay.
She's in.
Those are final thoughts.
Don't say I manifested it.
She beats Schumer if it's running. She beats Schumer.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be the best thing possible, because one thing Schumer got, again, EP gave $22,000 to Chuck Schumer, but Chuck Schumer is a party boss. He's a Tammany Hall late 1800s party boss. That would be fantastic, because the Democrats they have needed the Pelosi, Schumer, that type of party boss that understands how to manipulate the system to go after their opponents and really not get anything done, aside from spend a great deal of money to address issues like poverty, which they ignore, only to spend more money and oppose Trump implementing tariffs to prevent outsourcing, which causes poverty. So, I mean, it's like the Democrats should love Trump's tariffs because they bring jobs back to the country. Outsourcing is what causes poverty. Outsourcing is one of the greatest causes of poverty. This is a fact. It's a fact. There's really no economic rebuttal to it. Oh, well, it lowers prices. Not for the community or for the city that loses a manufacturing plant or loses the jobs. Then it doesn't matter if certain products are lower in price by $1. They don't have any jobs to afford the products to begin with. But anyway, let's continue.
Now, it's not until 28, and the Mondami mistakes, but I think she beats Schumer, and the Republicans will win. They'll benefit from that. I mean, God bless her. I want her to run because her policies are insane, and the Trumpian policies are going to succeed, and that's what.
So this is the redistricting fight that Greg Abbott started in Texas, and he's winning. And then Newsom tried to respond, but see, again, if you have 19 more House seats that Republicans can come up with after the Supreme Court victory on voting rights, it's game over. They'll win the House. But again, it might be even the best thing possible. Let them impeach Trump for the 50th time.
We're joined by Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott. Welcome back to the show, Governor. Good to see you.
You too, Shannon. Thanks.
So let's talk about some of these leaders who've left Texas. They say they're not on the run. They're not hiding. They're out doing media appearances. And part of what they want to do is to. So, Governor, how do you now expect?
All right, let's try this again.
Great to have you here. Thank you so much. Well, how would you take these Democrat districts out of your state?
So first of all, one reason why this even exists is because of the gross gerrymandering that's already been done by California, Illinois, New York, Massachusetts, and so many Democrat states. What Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, is threatening, and that is if Texas goes through with redistricting that eliminates 5 Democrat seats and aligns our congressional delegation with the values of the state of Texas, he says that he will work toward eliminating 5 Republican seats in California. And I'm saying that if he tries to do that, we have the capability using the same strategy that they're using in California to eliminate in Texas not just 5 seats of Democrats, but in fact 10 seats of Democrats. Yeah. And so here's what we know to oversimplify this.
So he can eliminate 10 Democratic Party seats in Texas if he implements another, like the equivalent of Prop 50 in California. So again, the gerrymandering issue, Democrats don't have any more seats that they can conjure up through gerrymandering. They've been very good at it for so many years. Republicans have not been good at it. Abbott is doing a very good job. I wish the Republicans in Indiana would have passed redistricting. I have no clue why they didn't. But anyway, let's continue.
And that is, before Texas is working to redraw the congressional lines in the state of Texas, California, Illinois, and New York, they've gone to extremism with regard to drawing lines that eliminate Republicans from the congressional delegations in their states, and they have run out of bullets and will not be able to make any further changes in the future. Right. But Texas and other Republican states will be able to make our states have larger Republican delegations in Congress.
Well, they wrote the book on gerrymandering, and to your point, they got no room left to go in the blue states, so it's not a winning proposition for them. But I want to get to this issue. You've issued warrants for Democrats who have fled the state. We've been following that. What kind of punishment could they face back in Texas?
So several different punishments. One is the warrant is to arrest them if they set foot back into the state of Texas, and they will be taken to the Texas Capitol that will restore a quorum and allow us to conduct business. Second, there are several forms of punishment that will be meted out by the Texas House of Representatives that have been established there. Third, I filed a lawsuit in the Texas Supreme Court to have these officials who are Democrats in the Texas House, have them removed from office because they are failing to conduct business as required by the Texas Constitution. What the Texas Constitution requires is that they must be here and act on bills before them. They're failing to fulfill their constitutional duties. I am seeking to have them removed from office because of their dereliction of duty.
Well, the obvious next question is, well, how long do you think this fight will go on? Are they going to just hang out in Illinois?
So we've been down this pathway before.
Yeah.
It happened 4 years ago, happened in 2003. And the fact of the matter is, they're going to run out of time. They're going to have to get back to the state of Texas. That's what always happens. But it really captures the moment. That's going to actually cause many of them to lose their jobs because running and hiding from a fight is un-Texan. And the fact that they turned tail and ran to Illinois, ran to California is embarrassing to them. It's a lack of character and it's a show of cowardice on their part by refusing to stay here and fight for what they believe and say their values are. And so I know that at one point in a time, when I call special session after special session after special session, they are eventually going to have to return and live up to their constitutional duty, and that is show up and cast votes based upon the bills before them.
Yeah, do your job. I'm going to change subject here, Governor. I want to say, mention that ICE is
insubordinate. Hello, hope all is well. And the Supreme Court keeps siding with Trump. Let's look at the
relief to each plaintiff with standing to sue. They say the lower courts have to move expeditiously with respect to each of these plaintiffs. It says the injunctions are also stayed to the extent that they prohibit executive agencies from developing and issuing public guidance about the executive plans to implement the executive order. If you remember, part of this executive order on birthright citizenship, the stay was that the agencies that would be responsible for actually implementing the change with birthright citizenship, those agencies couldn't even start making a plan. So that part of it is lifted as well. We do see that the dissent here comes from the three justices you expect. It looks like Justice Sotomayor filed the dissent. Kagan and Jackson joined that. Justice Jackson also filed a dissenting opinion, but there are a lot of concurrences here. Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, there are others. So we'll parse through this, but at its first blush, it looks like this is a win in putting a limit on these nationwide injunctions. We'll see how far those limits go as we dig back through this.
Got it. Want to bring Jonathan Turley back in. Shannon, thank you. So Jonathan, it sounds like this is kind of what you were mentioning earlier.
So that was how they stopped President Trump initially, and now they can't do that, and they can't engage in these nationwide injunctions anymore because yet again the Supreme Court sided with President Trump. The nationwide injunctions were ruled as unconstitutional. Okay, and if it's all about conservative and Democrat, well then all the federal judges, nobody questions their legitimacy on the left because they vote alongside or they help the Democratic Party. So they're legitimate. Legitimacy should not be if a court sides with one political side. Legitimacy should be based on the merits, which is why, for example, the Colorado State Supreme Court was overturned unanimously. These injunctions were opposed by Democrats. Ron Wyden, AOC, literally stated that Biden shouldn't listen to these injunctions. So the merits of the argument have oftentimes favor President Trump, with even Democrats agreeing with Trump when it suited them.
6-3 decision granting a partial stay on these nationwide injunctions unless there's a broader impact. Kind of decipher that for us.
Well, I've only started to read the opinion, but what I've seen does look like a victory for the Trump administration. Justice Barrett is saying that the only way for justices to exercise this type of universal injunction in some of these cases is equitable relief. But she does not find evidence that that type of relief was granted to these judges. So they indicate that the administration is likely to prevail on this issue. All of that is going to be awfully good news for this administration. They have been really hit with these sort of Lilliputian attacks. All these individual district judges effectively freezing federal policy and programs across the country. So it does appear to be a victory. It may be a bit more nuanced, but so far it looks like a good day for the Trump administration.
Andy, a question for you. Again, here are my dumb questions. This is not on the merits of birthright citizenship, then, it looks like, but am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. I think we never get to the merits because of the injunction issue. And it seemed to me that what made this case very interesting to people at the beginning was the birthright citizenship question and the very important question of whether that's compelled by the 14th Amendment or not. As the case was litigated, it really became this other thing, which was about these nationwide injunctions, which, for the reasons that Jonathan just mentioned, are the thing that has plagued the Trump administration across the board in its second term.
Andy, Jonathan, stand by. I want to bring in Shannon Bream once again. Shannon, I understand you're getting more details on the dissent in this case. Fill us in.
Yeah. I always think it's helpful to turn there because you can get a sense of exactly what they're pushing back against with all these different concurrences. And what they said is, because remember, again, this comes to us in the vehicle of the birthright citizenship case. And the questions at oral arguments were, okay, what if district judges decide differently and they aren't able to give an order for the entire country? Would a child be born in New Mexico have a different right than one in New Jersey, depending on how those judges have ruled in different places? Justice Sotomayor, writing for the dissent, says the parents of children covered by what she's calling the citizenship order would be well advised to file promptly class action suits and to request temporary injunctive relief for the class pending class certification. And so she's saying, listen, if you're one of these parents who are worried about what's going to happen with the citizenship of your child, you should be out there filing so that there will not be this patchwork, that every district will have an opportunity to weigh in. But she also says, get these cases moving quickly. She says lower courts would be advised to act swiftly on these requests for relief and to adjudicate the cases as quickly as they can so as to enable this court's prompt review, saying we have not decided that birthright citizenship question. We want the lower courts to act quickly so there's not this patchwork, so it gets back here and they actually answer the question on substance. She goes on to say this: today the court abdicates its vital.
You probably wouldn't want to do that, because if there's an issue with, if these class action lawsuits pertaining to birthright citizenship, there hasn't been a Supreme Court decision regarding the birthright citizenship. It was about injunction. But then if you file these class action lawsuits, then President Trump's administration will look very closely at the citizenship status of the parents that are filing the class action lawsuit. It probably doesn't make political sense, but anyway, or legal sense. But let's continue.
Role in these efforts, saying with the stroke of a pen, the president has, quote, made a solemn mockery of our Constitution. She said, pointing at the president, and then she goes on to blame the court. Rather than stand firm, this court gives way. So clearly the dissent not in line with what has been decided by the majority of this court. Again, we'll continue to read through.
The dissent, it's like the Democrats themselves were against nationwide injunctions. It's unbelievable. During Biden's administration.
Those concurrences as well.
Andy, here's a little bit from what Justice Amy Coney Barrett wrote in the majority part. She said that federal courts do not exercise general oversight of the executive branch. They resolve cases and controversies consistent with the authority Congress has given them.
Federal courts do not have jurisdiction over the executive branch. They don't they're not supposed to provide any oversight. They're separate branches of government. Okay, Trump can't fire a federal judge. So.
And then this is a sentence I really noted. She said, when a court concludes that the executive branch has acted unlawfully, the answer is not for the court to exceed its power to. And that might just be where this all came down to, Andy.
Well, yeah, of course.
Congress would have to impeach the president, but that's not going to happen because you need 2/3 of the Senate as well. So there is a mechanism to ensure that the presidency is held accountable, and it's not the judicial branch.
What they're saying is that this practice of nationwide injunctions, which we went almost 200 years of American history without having a single one, involves a court not only making a decision that binds the parties before it, but making a decision for the whole nation under circumstances where the court is the non-political branch that doesn't answer to the people whose lives are affected by these rulings. And I think it's interesting what Shannon just told us about Justice Sotomayor's suggestion that you go to class actions. That would even that, I think, would be a victory for the Trump administration in the sense that class actions are much more rigorous and much more regulated than the idea of these district judges in a completely untethered way just making rulings that apply to the whole country.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian.
And that's what Democrats relied on the first 6 months of Trump's administration. Nationwide injunctions that they were against during the Biden administration.
The Democratic National Committee will not release a long-awaited report detailing what went wrong for Dems in last year's election. DNC Chair Ken Martin saying, quote, "We completed a comprehensive review of what happened in 2024 and already putting our learnings into motion. Here's our North Star. Does this help us win? If the answer is no, it's a distraction from the core mission." Let's bring in senior advisor to Bernie Sanders, Faz Shakir, and Colin Reed, a Republican strategist. Here's a quote from the DNC. Party leaders hope to avoid contentious fights over the party's.
Bernie Sanders was cheated in 2016. We know that from the DNC emails and W. Wasserman Schultz resigning in disgrace. Of course, Bernie Sanders has never addressed that issue. He just, I guess, continues to say, thank you. Thank you for treating me in such an honorable manner.
Failings as it attempts to reboot for the 2026 midterms. Faz, if they're not going to be willing to talk amongst themselves, how can they expect to overcome things?
Well, obviously disagree with the decision here, Dana, and no surprise to you, but it's hard to be a Democratic Party when you're not being democratic in the way you want to be held accountable by the stakeholders of the Democratic Party. I've long argued, and I ran for DNC chair because I felt like we needed to open the doors, let people in. The challenge right now, many in the party, Ken Martin's a nice person. A lot of them believe that we need to play dead. Don't have a vision. Don't argue for anything. Profit off of the fact that Donald Trump's agenda is very unpopular right now.
But they don't have a vision. They don't want to implement anything Bernie Sanders or AOC or Elizabeth Warren pretend to want to implement. They're not touching Medicare for all, single payer. And Bernie Sanders used to want to ban fracking. They're not touching that because it would be, it would tank the U.S. economy. What on earth do Democrats want to run on aside from Trump is bad? There's nothing. Because the far left has all the ideas, but they're not feasible on a national level.
Win all these elections. I believe differently. Bernie Sanders believes differently, that you have to have a vision. You have to come forward with saying that you believe in something. The only way you're going to get there is being accountable to disagreement, having some disagreement within the party. It's healthy.
Colin, Quinnipiac poll says that congressional Democrats have a record low approval of 18%. And you come from a Republican side of the fence. What do you think about the Democrats deciding to bury this report?
Well, look, Dana, at its best, party committees do a couple things. They build infrastructure, they raise money, they help their candidates, and they put their team on a position to win. At their worst, they do this, which is create unnecessary, needless harmful headlines for the party and a distraction that frankly doesn't need to happen. But honestly, we don't need an autopsy to know what happened in 2024. We all have eyes. We all have ears. There were two things that happened. One, Joe Biden got elected, promising to move the country to the center, and he took it way to the left. Fez is right. You have to have a vision. Joe Biden said one thing, and he did something completely different. And the other thing that happened is the entire Democratic Party, the entire liberal ecosystem told us there was nothing to see, that Joe Biden was fit as a fiddle, that all was going right. And we've seen this week especially, all the harmful things that happen in this world, the things that a commander-in-chief has to be on the ball, someone who can deal with these things at a moment's notice. Joe Biden couldn't do it for 4 years. That promise, that trust is eroded with the American people. And until they deal with that, until they hit that issue head on, they have broken their promise to the American public.
Yeah,
And that's a good point. It's really interesting how there's no pundit on the left, no Democratic Party pundit. Media has completely buried. They have completely forgotten about the fact that they forced out a sitting president, an incumbent president that won his primary. So Bernie Sanders was cheated. They had the good but diabolical sense to cheat him before he could ever win a primary. And of course he didn't care. He just said nothing and whatever. Promoted a McCarthy-era myth that Trump was helped by Russia, which never happened. And not a shred of evidence that it ever happened. They were accusing Bernie of the same thing also. But they went from cheating a candidate to allowing Biden to win his primary, get 13 to 14 million votes or so, and then they kick him out. I mean, you just can't make this up. You can't make it up. And then just because of history, like they have all of media. They still have Jimmy Kimmel, who deserves like some kind of medal from them. Saturday Night Live, they have all these media advantages. They're not that important anymore because people don't trust media and they don't care about what media or Hollywood says about anything. But it's still an advantage. You still get to indoctrinate a certain base of wonderful, morally superior Democrats to voting Democrat no matter what. So media did its job for 10 years. They've indoctrinated enough people to just kind of make it competitive on a national scale somewhat, because Trump is bad. Trump is worse than anything that Democrats could have possibly done, which is always a completely outlandish scandal. It's completely private service with top secret intelligence, outlandish. Forcing an incumbent president because of obvious cognitive issues. He had so many issues, the poor man, God bless him, that when he won 5 years ago, people were still saying that people still agree with Trump. The average person, even the Democrats that say that Biden won fair and square, they don't truly believe that he had perfect cognitive abilities or, acceptable cognitive abilities in 2020. They don't truly believe that. They just care about winning. That's it. So everybody sees, but the Democratic Party pretends that it doesn't see, because their voters, the loyal constituents, will accept anything. Cheating Bernie Sanders, kicking Biden out of a primary he won. They will accept anything. Hoaxes, because all of media says one thing, and there are a lot of wonderful, morally superior, highly educated Democrats who will believe anything as long as their revered publications print these lies by omission.
Been saying that whichever Democratic nominee wants to emerge in 2028, it will be somebody that finally gives the Heisman to the Biden team. Okay, also want to get you to this because 2028, it's in the future, but you can kind of see it on the horizon. And there was a poll that said that AOC might just beat J.D. Vance. Watch her reaction.
Do you think that you could beat J.D. Vance in a head-to-head race for president, as polling suggests, in 2028?
Listen, these polls, like 3 years out, are, they are what they are. But let the record show, I would stomp him.
I thought that was...
She seems like a genuinely nice person. Just within that, 2 seconds of a video, she's like a nice human being, but is she good for the country? Like, She wanted Medicare for all or single payer or a Green New Deal. They're not talking about a green. Nothing that AOC ran on to become Congresswoman, nothing that she ran on is a part of any vision she has in 2025. I would say, like, they're not talking about a Green New Deal. Because you can't talk about a Green New Deal and boost the economy at the same time. It's impossible.
Cute and funny, but it also is something that I think Bernie Sanders believes, Faz.
AOC has never taken corporate PAC money. She's a bold advocate for Medicare for all.
She's taken corporate money. Corporate PAC money would be different. She's even taken private insurance corporation money. She was accused of campaign finance violations initially. Numerous campaign finance violations.
She's one of the least wealthy members of Congress because she comes from a working class background. She's never had wealth in her family.
She wore a dress that was like something like $5-10 grand, something like that, for one of these against oligarchy things. And by the way, Democrats had more billionaires the past 3 election cycles than Republicans.
And she has the integrity to take on people with wealth and power. For those reasons and more, I believe she would defeat J.D. Vance in 2028.
This gentleman seems also like an honorable, good person, amiable person. There is zero chance that AOC would defeat J.D. Vance. She might not even be able to defeat Chris Christie if he ran for president, and let's say, in some alternate bizarro world universe where there's like this giant buffet at the White House or whatever, and it's Chris Christie as the Republican nominee. AOC might not even defeat him. So that means she would have a chance at defeating, But I mean, it's like there's zero chance on a national level because she's not running on single payer healthcare. Green New Deal. Bernie Sanders wanted to ban fracking. So she did take corporate donations. In fact, like a whole lot of donations from corporations. There is nothing that she ran on 8 years ago that she's running on now. So I don't know. They cheated Bernie Sanders in 2016. Democrats still haven't come to terms with that. So they did the same thing to Biden, even worse. So it's like, I don't know. Anyway, the best thing, again, for Trump is to have these headlines. It's time to accept the Supreme Court is illegitimate. Yes, we must accept it. It's illegitimate. What? Of course we must accept. Yes, Trump won every battleground state. He won the popular vote, and he wins 94% of the Supreme Court decisions. But of course, he's a despot. And the Democrats are very good, morally superior, as they literally stole the primary from Biden after he won it and cheated Bernie Sanders 10 years earlier and created a McCarthy-era hoax called Russiagate and went to bat for Hunter's laptop, another person who seems like a genuinely, amiable, nice person. He was on the Sean Ryan podcast. It was very interesting, really interesting listening to Hunter Biden. Like, he's like a normal, nice person, interesting to listen to. 50 intelligence officials went to bat for his laptop. That is something also that you couldn't even talk about. You would lose your ability to be on any social media platform if you talked about that. That's what's called censorship. And 50, and maybe not his doing, but the system went to bat for Hunter and Joe Biden. And that 50 intelligence officials are not going to protect Eric Trump or Donald Trump Jr. or Donald Trump or anyone who's associated with President Trump if they have a laptop possibly full of graft and bribery. So, but 50 intelligence officials lied, and that's the issue. But we have to talk about legitimacy of the Supreme Court because Democrats are routinely on the wrong side of the Constitution. They're engaged continually in unconstitutional behavior, decisions, practices. But anyway, hit subscribe. Republicans still have a lead with older voters. And what can I tell you? Be here later this evening. God bless you all. 2026 is going to be awesome. We'll go above 300,000 subs finally. Took me a long while, but I thank God for everything.